Hola, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos a una nueva entrevista de Carta Política, una nueva y muy particular entrevista de Carta Política. El país que nos toca tratar hoy es Estados Unidos, ni más ni menos. Vamos a hablar de las midterms, las elecciones de medio término, en las que se va a renovar la Cámara de Representantes y parte del Senado, así como varios cargos a nivel estatal y local, casi 40 gobernaciones. Un proceso electoral clave para el mundo. Hablamos de una superpotencia mundial, ni más ni menos. Y para hablar sobre el tema, ¿quién mejor que alguien de Estados Unidos? Nos encontramos con Sean Gibbons, recientemente graduado en Política Internacional en la Universidad Estatal de Michigan. So, this interview will be in English. I'm a bit nervous. My English is not perfect. No, my English is less than perfect. I have to admit it, but I promise I will do my best. How are you, Sean? Welcome to Carta Política.
Doing great, and I'm happy to be on the program.
We are happy to have you here. So we're going to start. If you could briefly describe the United States electoral system for the congressional elections.
Okay, so yeah, midterm elections happen half cycle between every presidential election. So every 2 years after a presidential election, there's a midterm election. And up for the ballot are all 435 House representatives and 1/3 of the senators. House representatives serve 2-year terms and senators serve 6-year terms. All of our elections are single-member district elections. So they're all divided into districts and one person wins these elections. So either the district or the state, there's one person that wins. Each state decides what electoral system is being used. So some states use a system, well, most states use first past the post. So the person who receives the most votes on the ballot wins. Some states use a majoritarian system, which requires a two rounds of elections. And other states use a ranked choice method in which you can rank candidates, but the majority are first past the post.
People from abroad know a little about the United States politics. We know about the two-party system, Republicans, Democrats. The two parties are more institutions themselves than parties in the institution. But I understand that there are more inside the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. The two parties have a lot of different ideas inside. In recent years, the Democratic Party is divided between progressives, moderates, and there are some socialists maybe, or some centrists. What can you say about the current internal situation of the Democratic Party under the Biden administration? What is the dominant faction in this election?
Okay, very much like you stated, both parties, part of result of our electoral system are very big tent parties. They have a or the Democrats specifically have a progressive wing and a more moderate wing. Biden himself, while he tends to be more moderate, is still in the center between a more progressive wing and a more moderate wing, some of which, particularly in the Senate, are hamstringing his agenda by holding up legislation and forcing compromise with Republicans, or just compromise with themselves between Biden and the moderate Democrats. In terms of the progressives, while they are obtaining a large coalition in the House and largely in the House, they have a very small coalition in the United States Senate. While they're gaining more seats in the House, they still are very limited in their ability to affect legislation, as moderates are able to block most of what they propose. As they do expand their coalition within the House over time through different election cycles, they may be able to influence the legislator more. But in this current legislative session and the Biden presidency, progressives are very limited, I would say, in their ability to affect the general legislation that gets passed by the House.
Okay, That's very interesting. And we have a different situation, I think, in the Republican Party, because, I mean, we have a division, but the party is more defined as a conservative force. I mean, we have a clear epicenter of the divisions. You are with Donald Trump or you are not with Donald Trump. So what is the current internal situation of the Republican Party? Are the Republican nominees more pro-Trump? MAGA is the word, I think, or some of them reject his leadership?
Yeah, for the most part, when it comes to Republicans, it's very polarized around the issue of Trump, where if a Republican is trying to project themselves as anti-Trump, they get eaten alive by their party. So we have some data on this. There were 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump, which that would be seen as a way of kind of outwardly showing that they're not in support of Trump. And only 2 of them survived primaries in their cycle. So yeah, we have primary elections in America where they get the party gets to decide the candidate before the general election. And only 2 of the 10 House Republicans that voted to impeach Donald Trump were able to survive those primaries. So one thing is clear, there are a lot of Republicans who may want to distance themselves from Trump during their elections. These particularly are Republican Senate candidates or Republican candidates in competitive House races. And how they've done that is campaigning largely on the economy or inflation, rather than a lot of the election-related issues in 2020 that Donald Trump has campaigned on.
Thank you very much. Now that we have an inside view of the political parties, we know that the battle is much more complex than just 2 parties. Most polls predict a close race, but favorable to the opposition. What can we expect in the House of Representatives? It's certain that the Republicans will take control, or do the Democrats still have a chance?
Yeah, one thing that's been very interesting about this election cycle is the polling does not appear to be very reliable on either internals or kind of what we've traditionally had as like the golden ticket pollsters. We have a lot less accurate polling on the election, and it's kind of led there to be a variety of different narratives on what people are expecting. Polling aggregates like 538 have largely projected a very close race, with Republicans edging it out in the House, and in the Senate, they kind of it seems to be like there'll be either a 50-50 Senate, or Republicans might win 51 seats, or Democrats might win 51 seats. So the Senate, it appears, will be very, very close. The majority opinion when it comes to the House has been that Republicans will take control over the House.
Okay, and for the Senate, what are the key races? Because what are the key races?
Yes, so in the Senate, there are a variety of races that are projected to be very close. The largest being Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. There are some races that both parties are trying to position themselves strongly against, which would be Ohio for the Democrats, where they have a strong candidate running against what's perceived to be a weaker Republican candidate. And for the Republicans, they're also seeking to win in New Hampshire.
Regarding the states that renew governor, which one seems most important to you? What are the key races here?
Yeah, so with the gubernatorial elections, there are 36 governors up, gubernatorial seats up on the ballot, and this is actually a much more a less, while it's still polarized. A lot of these elections tend to differ very heavily from where the national political situation is. So there are very, very competitive elections happening in states like Oklahoma, which is a very traditionally Republican state. But in terms of the most important elections that are happening, I believe my home state of Michigan is one governor election, which will be pretty important because Michigan will be a battleground state for 2024. In addition to that, states like Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin should also be some pretty important states to watch in this upcoming election for the governor control.
We can say the United States moves closer to a political realignment.
I think so. In terms of realignment, a lot of states are constantly shifting towards either Republicans or Democrats. Traditionally, the Midwest used to be a place where states in the northern part of America, a little bit eastern, but not the direct Northeast. There have been traditionally Democratic strongholds, and they're kind of shifting Republican. There are many places in the South of the United States that have been more traditionally Republican that over the long term may switch more to Democrat. But yeah, like you said, there does appear to be a little bit of realignment throughout the country, realignment throughout the country, as the shift is not the shift towards Republicans or the shift towards Democrats is not linear throughout the country. In some areas, it's shifting more toward Republican, and then in some areas, it's shifting towards Democrats.
Thank you, Sean. To be ending, what can be the main consequences of a Republican victory, and what can be the main consequences of a Democratic victory?
Okay, so this is a very important question because it'll determine like what Democrats will be able to do if they lose the House, or what Republicans plan to do if they win control of the legislature in these midterms. So in the current position, the Democrats have a trifecta, which means they control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And in that, they're heavily able to have control over the legislation that they implement and appointments of federal judges, which has a large control over American politics. If Democrats were to lose the House and Republicans were to take control of the House, it would make it so legislation is much harder to pass, especially in our current political environment, which is very polarized. So there could end up being a government shutdown over the budget potentially. Also, Republicans, when the opposition party has power of the House, they tend to run investigations on the party that holds the presidency. So there could be a lot of investigations on the Biden presidency if Republicans were to get in control of the House. Now, if Democrats were to gain seats in the Senate, say the election goes very well for them, they maintain the House, and they gain 2 seats in the Senate, they may actually be able to pass more progressive legislation or legislation, like more of their agenda that is currently being limited by the 2 most moderate senators in the Senate, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. That would be make for a very interesting outcome if Democrats were to gain in the Senate and the House, no matter how unlikely that would be. And lastly, if Republicans were to win control of the Senate, it would probably lead to them blocking a lot of judicial appointments for the federal courts that Democrats have power to do currently with control of the presidency. So that could kind of ensure that our federal courts dominated very heavily by Republicans if they maintain control of, or if the Republicans were to win control of the Senate.
Thank you so much for this interview, and gracias a todos los que nos están viendo y a todos los que nos van a ver. Con esto cerramos esta entrevista de Carta Política. Les recuerdo que pueden seguirnos en Twitter como @politicacarta o en Instagram como Carta Política. La verdad fue mi primera entrevista en inglés, me sentí un poco nervioso, tengo que admitirlo. Mi inglés no es bueno, reitero, pero bueno. Thank you so much, and nos estaremos viendo en futuras entrevistas. Muchas gracias.